Good morning, everyone. Today is the April 25th Finance Committee meeting budget presentation. We're just waiting on a couple other people, but we'll get started in the meantime. I wanted to start today with having Mr. Copeland answer some of our outstanding questions from previous presentations, and then we'll move forward with our presentation for today.
Thank you. So I'm going to, either following or during the presentation on operations, we've had some questions, and I'm going to try and attempt to answer them. So one of the questions was, the budget presentation reported static numbers this budget year for FTEs, that's full-time equivalents, in other words, the number of people in that particular department, and cost for operating. What were the historical numbers for each of those over the last 3 years? And these were put together, by the way, by Pat Ganan. So generally speaking, with regard to operations department staffing, our full-time equivalent figures have essentially remained the same over the last 3 years. Grounds is at about 9, or not about, is at 9. We reduced building maintenance by 1 FTE, and custodians increased by 1 FTE since 2015-16. We have increased, and let me just say, I think that the custodial increases were due to, construction, adding more square footage and so forth. Mr. Orlando is nodding yes. We've increased transportation by 4, 2 drivers and 2 aides, obviously because we get more students, get more buses, and so forth. The March 14th presentation shows the average annual building maintenance cost from 2014 to 2016. Another question, what's the current year-to-date run rate for operating expenses through 12/31/17? This should be compared to the upcoming budget for 2018-19. Budgeting should be against current year run rate, not what was previously budgeted last year. This is the individual statement, trying to figure out the actual cost. So the problem with a run rate is that not all expenses occur in equal allotments, and so I'm not sure I would necessarily agree with the presumption or the premise of the statement. However, the answer, as operating expenses can vary significantly from year to year due to the factors such as weather conditions, unanticipated repairs, we rely on complete historical prior year expenditures while developing the budget. So that's, and we also have been doing a monthly financial report, and so both of those are available in board docs. Next question is, they preface it by saying this is not intended as a political statement, simply trying to understand a comparison with with common market providers. What external benchmarking does the district perform in terms of comparing its actual expenses in these categories? I preface my remarks by saying there's a saying we have in schools, once you visited one school in Pennsylvania, you visited one school in Pennsylvania. Trying to compare them is often very, very difficult, sets of circumstances. However, we do look at comparisons from time to time. Buildings, grounds, and custodial maintenance activities. The Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, otherwise known as PASBO, periodically publishes a facilities benchmarking study using that data. The results vary among districts, and by the way, it's self-reported as to districts. The most realistic benchmarking value in the study is one that provides an overall measure of how much a district is spending on maintenance compared to the total expenditures in the district. The study compares a value for general fund maintenance expenditures as a percent of total general fund expenditures. This can then be used to compare against median values for districts in the southeast portion of the state and against districts with similar enrollments. In both cases, Lower Merion School District's maintenance expenses as a percentage of total general fund expenses are slightly below the median value. A benchmark, a comparison of utilities expenditures was shown in slide 17 of the presentation. But some specifics. Student transportation operations, as part of the investigating a change to high school start times, LSMD, engaged school bus consultants, a national school transportation consulting firm to investigate LMSD's current school bus operations. The report compared LMSD's bus operations and key performance indicators to industry averages for overall riders per bus trip, trips per bus, and so forth. In all cases, LMSD's operations met or exceeded industry standards. A particular note was the overall trips per bus, where LMSD value of 6.05 exceeded the industry standard of 5, and average trip time where LMSD value of 36 minutes was well within the industry average of 45 minutes. I think that's probably a better standard that people can understand. So in other words, we picked kids up and delivered them to their destination on average with more efficiency than the industry average. Is that correct, Mr. Ganand? Did I say that correct? Yes, okay. Bus mechanic staffing per school bus fleet. School Bus Fleet magazine. There's actually a magazine called School Bus Fleet. Yes. Okay, I'm not going to.
There's at least one competitor to it.
Okay. I will not read either one, I trust. The recommended ratio of buses to each mechanic is 13. LMSD ratio is 20 buses per mechanic, which is equal to the national average. When the non-bus vehicles of LMSD support fleet are added in, the overall ratio is 26 vehicles per mechanic. It's important to note that very little vehicle maintenance work is sent to outside vendors. As a rule, Lower Merion outsources only body work, glass work, or very large repairs. I think that, along with some other things, is important to mention because that wouldn't necessarily show up in the PASBO material. You would have to look elsewhere for that. External maintenance, gardening and snow removal, grounds maintenance and snow removal are performed by the in-house in operations department. Grounds maintenance is augmented by some contracted services as tree trimming and snow removal. Costs are included in the overall figures presented. Security, to enhance school security, our secondary schools are staffed with campus aides who are not armed. All exterior doors are locked. Once school begins in the morning, entry to the building is controlled through school's main office. So, you know, one of the things that was interesting when we looked at this, some benchmarking will compare the number of, let's say, grounds crew to the acreages, but what's not included in that is, for instance, we take care of, we do some maintenance work at South Ardmore Park, correct? But that wouldn't have gone into our acreage, so you wouldn't necessarily see that as part of it. Another question said you reported a capital reserve fund balance of $11,836,376 in your audited financial statements for fiscal year ending 6/30/17. Notably, $4.9 million was transferred from the operating budget. Wait a minute, for their budget to the reserve. And in the follow-up question, in the upcoming year, you project to expend $6.5 million from this reserve, while the rest of the expenditures will be funded through outside financing. What do you project to transfer from the operating budget, the current fiscal year, into capital reserve? And we really, the capital reserve is used to fund capital items such as capital improvement, bus replacements, district work. And at this point, it would, business administrator saying it's undetermined at this time. Outside financing is typically used for capital projects to fund major asset acquisition and major construction projects. So that was a lot of follow-up answers because we had a lot of follow-up questions.
Great, thank you. And are we going to send those answers directly to the person who
We were going to just leave it for the record, just.
Well, we can talk about that offline, but yeah, because I'd also like to have them sent to the board as well, so that you can look at them and actually process them. So if you could forward them or drop them in board docs, one or the other. Okay. The only other comment I would make is Mr. Orlando has been adding to the business meeting every month, and Mr. Copeland mentioned it, the budget to actual statement, and it's in board. It's if you go on the business meeting and to the finance section of the business meeting, it's item 10. Item 10D, it's at the end of the financial report. So it's now part of the regular financial report every month. So if you want to see our budget to actual, that's where you find it. You find it in the business meeting presentation. So with that, let's jump into our information systems section. And Mr. Frazier, all yours.
Good morning. So just a few slides as a quick overview of the Information Systems Department. The Information Systems Department consists of 21 employees. 2 of those are administrators. We have 6 technicians in the buildings who are local help desks to the buildings. We have 3 desktop technicians who serve both as help desk, and one of those is an actual break fix technician doing our repairs here in-house. We have 3 network technicians. There are system administrators, our network administrators, and then we have 2 database analysts and a web developer. So just to give you a scope of the department, to continue looking at what it is that we maintain. This is our current numbers. You could see there's 2 columns there. The column on the left is devices that are actually presently connected to our network. Column on the right, they're either software or devices not connected to our network. I point that out because we're maintaining over 14,000 devices presently on our network. I often point that out because I don't think people realize the size of the operation that Lower Merion School District maintains with technology, and it is large. We're equivalent of a medium-sized enterprise. This is a visual of our help desk tickets. It's from July 1st through March 31st. During that period of time this year, we've received 8,493 help desk tickets. And during that peak time there, through August through September, or actually September 1st through October 31st, we were receiving 1,476 tickets per month. So it's a pretty busy operation. These are the same numbers at the top, but this slide includes hardware repairs. As you may recall, we brought hardware repairs in-house 2 years ago, and we repaired that number of devices that you see there. Conservative estimate, and this is very conservative, if we just back out the number of days in shipping devices out for repairs and receiving them back from repairs, we've reduced the number of days of equipment out of service by 896 days, if we just back out shipping days. So that means that we're keeping carts of devices that are available to teachers at full strength rather than teachers having to ask students to share devices.
George,
Sure.
So in general, how long is if you had to ship it out, so you'd lose it for 2 weeks?
It really varies. It varies by what the issue is, whether or not the outsource had the parts or not, and there's a little bit of truth in that with us as well. If we receive a device in and we have the part, a lot of times that's turned around in a couple days. If we have to wait for the part to come in or we need additional troubleshooting, it'll take a little bit longer. So that varies. That's why I'm taking the very conservative approach of saying if we just back out shipping days, we're returning equipment that much faster. So moving on to the budget, this is a similar visual as last year. And you can see that large orange part of what we've fondly started calling the donut. The large orange part of the donut is the instructional computers and one-to-one. So approximately half of the budget immediately goes to instructional computers and one-to-one. And if you just follow that around counterclockwise, you can see the next largest bite of the donut is hardware and software maintenance. And that's things like paying for software support, hardware support throughout the year. As we continue to move around, you can see there's a replacement cost for equipment. Outsourced services is larger this year because of some upcoming projects. And then you can see there's another large part there in our telecom, internet, and network services. So I'm just going to go through some slides and try to drill in a little bit further on each one of those areas. So starting off with the instructional computers and one-to-one, this is a breakout of where that large percentage of money is going to. And again, these numbers will vary year to year. It depends on what equipment needs to be replaced by grade level. Pretty consistent purchases at the high school because of the one-to-one and the incoming freshmen. But beyond that, you're going to see these numbers fluctuate from year to year. To break that out a little bit further, this coming year, we've budgeted for, I'll bring your attention first to lower right-hand side of that slide. You can see that we have a large number of teachers whose MacBooks are up for refresh. So that's a pretty large number, larger than last year because there were fewer teachers that needed their devices refreshed. Just to continue some of the highlights on there, you can see that we're replacing music lab desktop computers, video editing desktop computers, library help center computers. So again, these are things that you won't see on this slide probably at the high school level for 4 or 5 more years. Continuing around counterclockwise, the elementaries, not a lot of refresh this year, but in the middle school you can see that we're refreshing 2 Welsh Valley Tech Ed labs. And again, these things will appear and disappear in 4 and 5 year periods. Continuing on. So just to explain the student budget a little bit more. So initially the district was all MacBooks for students. So that kind of became the foundation of the budget. And a MacBook cost approximately $1,150. And we use that number as a foundation for budgeting for computers, instructional computers throughout the district. So we said if the high school is 1-to-1, let's try to make sure we have a ratio of 1.5 to 1 at the middle schools and a ratio of 2 to 1 at the elementary schools. And you can see there the budget ratio of that $1,150. So we're spending a little bit more than $1,150 per student over 4 years at the high school. You can see we're spending a little bit better than 1.5 at the middle school, and at the elementary school we're right at the goal we had set, which is 2. Now that's the budget number. Now if you talk about actual devices, that's changed a lot over the last few years because of the availability of less expensive equipment. So the middle schools, for example, have been using that budget to buy Chromebooks. We have a large number of Chromebooks in our middle school, a growing number of Chromebooks in our middle school, because they're a less expensive device. So rather than taking that budget per student and putting it back into MacBooks, they're taking that budget and putting it into Chromebooks. And it was that same budget model that allowed the elementary schools to purchase iPads. That's the same money that we used to buy the iPads at the kindergarten and first grade level. That's why you didn't see a request for more money in the IS department budget. We just repurposed that money for that equipment, therefore maintaining a relatively level budget throughout the years. Moving on.
Hold on one
sure.
second, George.
Absolutely.
Back up one more slide.
Sure.
Student to budget ratio.
Yep.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So your budget is $1,150
Yep.
per. Is that 2805 the number of students, or is that 2805 the money spent per student? I'm confused by this slide.
That's the actual number of devices underneath the budget. that 2805.
Okay.
Is the number of budgets present, or I'm sorry, the number of devices presently.
So the titles don't go down? So that's not a number? That's not a dollar number in that column? That's a number of devices, so it's going across?
Well, yes, you're accurate. Students, it's down and across. Budget is, you could do the math on the number of devices there, backing out that $1,150.
So if there's, shouldn't the ratio be higher? If you only have 2,679 students and you have 2,805 devices, isn't that greater than one per student?
There's a greater number of devices per student, so that .96 actually reflects that there's a larger number of devices per student.
Okay, so it's, all right, I think I got it. Sorry about that.
No? So moving to that next larger area that was in the budget, hardware and software maintenance. And again, these are just some of the expensive items. This isn't a list of all the items, but I'm just trying to give you a snapshot of where the funds go. For example, Adobe Creative Cloud, that's on all the student devices, and that is the software that students use for, you're most familiar with Photoshop. Most people are familiar with Photoshop. This is the product that the students use for any type of photo manipulation, and the suite comes with a variety of other software packages. But it's mostly, this is the product that you would think of as students using in art classes in the development of artistic skills. Another example here, Apple Client Management. So we're paying annually for software to help us manage that large Mac fleet of computers. We have over 6,000 Macintosh computers. We need a product to help us manage that, and that's the product that does it. The largest cost in the hardware and software maintenance is the Cisco SmartNet, and that covers a broad variety of devices, and it is the most expensive annual cost in hardware and software maintenance. But just to give you a flavor of some of the things that supports our phone system. So the phone system throughout the district is that the support for that is Cisco SmartNet. It also is support on things like our core network switches, which I'll talk about. It's also the main switches that are in each of the buildings that connect the buildings to our data center. So that covers a large number of devices and a large number of services. Microsoft, we pay one single cost annually for all of our Microsoft products. There are some one-offs to that if we're purchasing something specific at the server level, for example, but all the Microsoft Office products that we install on the computers are all covered underneath that single cost. Maybe more familiar, PowerSchool, that's our annual cost for PowerSchool. Our virtual server hosts, so we have a small number of physical servers, but we put those virtual servers on top of it, and that's the cost for maintaining that hardware annually. Moving on to outsourced services, this is these prices here, those first two prices there for network refresh phase 1 and phase 2. These are estimates for outsourced services, and what that's for is replacing our core switches. And I'll touch on this a few times throughout the presentation. That picture on the right there is actually a picture of our one of two of our core network switches. So literally the center of our network universe resides in one of those two boxes. In fact, those yellow cables there that are easier to discern in the picture, you can actually trace those out of the building, onto the telephone poles, down the street, and into each one of the buildings. So that right there is the device that connects the other 14 or 13 locations to this building and then to the larger network and the internet. So those products have been in service for 8 years. It's time for us to refresh those. And it's a very, very large project and requires outsourced services to do that. Phase 2 is actually replacing our firewalls. We have numerous firewalls defending the outside of the district and internally segmenting the district. Again, requires outsourced professional services to help us do that. We're also looking to update our SharePoint servers, and I'll touch on some of the good things we're doing with that. And on top of SharePoint, Knowledge Lake and Nintex, which are the products that we use on top of SharePoint, and I'll expand on those a little bit as well. Just to provide a visual, again, the core is what we're talking about using that professional services money for. That's those first 2 devices there on the left. Just to try to give you an idea of the scope of this, so those 2 devices connect the 14 buildings, which connect the 71 telecommunications closets, which connect 687 wireless access points. And then it's those 14,000 products that I mentioned earlier all connect back to that network. So fundamentally, we're talking about the core is where we have those 14,000 devices communicating through. And we're familiar now that the network is more than just Google and YouTube. It's how we communicate the building automation systems. It's how we operate our security cameras. It's our phone system. It's become an extremely critical infrastructure of the district.
George, is there a way to manage the HVAC systems and what have you if the network goes down?
Well, the HVAC technicians can go to the buildings and connect directly to that system. So yes, but for monitoring and remote access, that is through our network. So moving on, I had mentioned we're also talking about in phase 2 replacing our firewalls. This is a snapshot of the last quarter, so January through March, of what our outside firewall has allowed and blocked. And these numbers are almost hard to digest. But as an example, right at the top we have January 2018, total allowed, blocked, and geolocation. So we see that from the United States, our firewalls permitted 1,462,000 connections into the district, but it also blocked 35 million connections from the United States trying to come into the district. So I don't want to say that all 35 million is nefarious activity, but probably a large part of that is malicious and nefarious activity. If you look down the geolocation column, you can see that we're very popular in the Russian Federation. I can't tell you why, but I can tell you that we're blocking a large number of their attempts to access our network. Yes.
Do we have any sense of how this compares with other organizations, other school districts, other businesses?
No, I've never actually tried to compare it against other numbers, but I can tell you that any publicly accessible network on the internet is under constant attack. If you talk to any type of security firm, consultants, professionals, they will tell you that if it's accessible from the internet, it's under constant attack, both from humans and from automated software. Automated software will troll the internet trying to find known vulnerabilities and then try to exploit those. So I don't want to paint the picture that we're seeing more than other places, but it's what the takeaway is the importance of what we're doing with security in terms of our perimeter security and preventing attacks against the district. That final column on the right there is what bubbled to the top for Presidio Managed Services, our outsourced managed security services and you can see there that they again on their radar was 2,410 exploit attacks, for example, that they were paying attention to. Now, I will tell you, over the same period of time, eventually this turned into 45 tickets for us. So these numbers eventually boiled down to Presidio saying, hey, Lower Merion, here's 45 tickets that you need to pay attention to, and what do you want us to do with them? And we work through those situations and say, you know what, let's block that, or let's prevent that, or that's okay. That's nothing serious. So it does vary, but again, I just wanted to give you a flavor of the type of activity that we're talking about. I have about 5 slides of in-house products that we've built with SharePoint. SharePoint is a point of pride for us. We've done a lot to provide solutions for different departments throughout the district. So I'm going to move through these next slides rather quickly, but here we have a list of solutions that we've developed in-house for example, the Human Services Department. Other departments like contract tracking form is something that we're working on heavily with the business office. Catering request form, that's an easy one. Actually, one of our first ones that we developed that has proven useful. Student services, again, providing products for them, for their needs. Curriculum as well. Elementary, we're familiar with the Halloween parade. That was, again, one of our early efforts to provide a service. We're heavily trying to provide data regarding, we're heavily trying to provide reports for data that the schools are looking for, as you can see there in the high school and middle school solutions. And then at the high schools, that top one there is a real point of pride for us. Student intervention tracking form, not that it's used a lot, but it is a solution that we developed, and this is a snapshot of it, a screenshot of it, that is used in the high schools. It was used primarily in Lower Merion. We recently deployed it to Harriton, but this is a form, and it's an active form. Depending upon how you select it, it opens up additional fields. But this is a form that the buildings are using when they identify a student that may need some additional assistance. And it helps them share that information, and it helps them track what interventions they've provided and how to provide more interventions for the students. So a real point of pride for us. One of those products that we developed that we feel like is very timely and very helpful where it counts, and that's with the students.
I have a quick question. Is
Sure.
that available only to the high schools?
Right now, yep, it's only available to the high schools. It came from Lower Merion. It was a request from Lower Merion. We recently deployed it to Harriton. And it is certainly something that we can continue to work into the other buildings as it's required.
I particularly
requested.
think that it would be helpful in the middle schools, too.
And we can certainly share that with the middle schools. Security and compliance, a growing cost. So just a quick run through here. You can see antivirus in a large enterprise like this is expensive, nearly $40,000. I mentioned Presidio Managed Services a lot. That's an annual cost of $70,000. Compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act, that's our web filter. You can see that that's $52,000. Just in addition to that, I just wanted to tack on other things that we're doing for security and compliance, for example, COPA and FERPA software compliance, and we're very attentive to confidentiality and sensitive data. Moving on to telecom and internet, what it costs to provide internet access for an enterprise this size. We still do buy DDoS mitigation services. In fact, in this year's Verizon report, DDoS attacks is still the #1 attack against school districts. Not quite sure why. I guess students trying to avoid a test maybe, or I don't know. But DDoS still remains the #1 attack against education. New initiatives. We are testing a product presently that we hope will help reduce the account management and log-on issues for online textbooks. We have a growing number of online textbook products, and sometimes each one of those products has its own account management, and it's very cumbersome to manage all those accounts for students and teachers. So we've been investigating single sign-on solutions that will help reduce the number of accounts that students would need to remember and departments would have to manage. Also, I just want to point out we are trying to implement more compliance with our website, and so we'll be seeing that as a new initiative as well. Training, I do push training a lot with my team. It's important that we're training as often as possible. And in addition to that, we do internal policy training and internal procedure training. This is the 5-year obsolescence plan. This is the part of the budget that is outside of the general fund and in the capital reserve. Next year, we're looking at, again, replacing those core items in our firewalls and our switches. And we're also looking to purchase disaster recovery servers. And then the following year, again, think of that visual of the network. We're looking to refresh the distribution layer. That's the layer of the network that connects the buildings back to the data center in this building. Data center air conditioning. We don't really think about air conditioning when it comes to technology, but when you're running a lot of equipment, it gets hot, and we need to control the environment for that. And then from there out, you can see that what we have next on our plate of things to refresh. These are estimates. You know, we put these things on our radar as we anticipate what we're going to need to replace in the future. Those numbers for years 3, 4, and 5 are strictly estimates, and they will be tuned as we get closer to those years, and sometimes we have to move things around in order to fit within the budget. I believe that's it.
Thank you, George. So, what is this? 1, 2, 3. Is this the fourth slide? 3, 4. That has the chart. No, maybe it's 6 with the donut. So the total of your budget is 4.2 million. Is that about right?
Correct. 4.3.
And that's just. So it's staff overtime, but it's not staffing?
That's correct.
So just the amount of staff time that we do beyond what there is considered their normal day?
Correct.
Are our technology staff, they punch in and out? Are they hourly or are they?
They do. They do. There's 2 administrators, and then the other 19 are staff that punch in and out.
They do punch in, but they're salaried individuals.
Oh.
They do clock in each
So I'm just trying to understand overtime.
Overtime's anything beyond their work day that they get overtime. So if there's I don't know, when the switches go or something, 8 o'clock at night, well, one of the technicians is coming in to fix it, they're getting overtime.
Okay, and so what's their staff day?
It varies. We have some folks that come in early. We have 2 employees that come in early, and they kind of just check things and make sure everything's up and running. In fact, one of them is in the audience, Jess Bolton. She comes in early and kind of gives the databases and the systems that we rely on a pulse check to make sure things are operating. And we also, our network technician comes in regularly early.
So is that like 6 to 3 as opposed to 9 to 5? Or
Correct,
like?
correct. I'm sorry?
8-hour work.
They work 8.5 hours, half-hour lunch.
Any other questions on this?
Thank you for this. I guess my first question is, obviously, with just enrollment growth's coming up, so we'll probably have, 100 more high school students next year than we did this year. For the core, are you planning to have 1,000 more kids, for the next 8 years? Because that's what we're looking at as you upgrade the core.
Yeah, we do try to anticipate greater capacity, and that is certainly part of our planning. When we sit down with Presidio, who will help us design this, that's certainly part of the conversation. What's your anticipated growth? So, for example, we need to take into consideration that we may have another location, and what capacity do we need to build in for that additional location?
My second is, to the extent, I think most of the time it's not split out, but if it is split out where we purchase a paper textbook and perhaps purchase an online support service on top of that, does the online service come to your budget if it's coupled with a textbook, or do you think, or is that, as far as you know, go to the curriculum budget to purchase both the paper copy and any software support that goes with it?
I think I could say pretty definitively it remains in the department or curriculum department or buildings budget or whatever department it is.
Not yours?
No, not mine. Fundamentally, I'm providing a basic infrastructure that the departments build on. So we provide a laptop, we provide the operating system, we provide the network, we provide the access, we provide fundamental software. What they put on top of that fundamentally comes out of their budget.
How much redundancy is built into your system to make sure that, this is an integral part of our educational program?
Sure. So in the example of the core, there are in fact redundant. There's a lot of different ways you can configure it, but the easiest way to think of is active-passive. So if one of those core switches goes down, everything falls over to the other switch, and it will take over. One of the new initiatives you saw was for a redundant internet router. So we're trying to build redundancy into the network out to where our network reaches the street. Once we go out to the street, and I literally mean the telephone pole that is outside the high school driveway, that's where our redundancy falls off. So that's where squirrels become a danger to us. But from there down, we're trying to build in redundancy.
And in terms of your personnel, how is there redundancy, a little bit of redundancy built in?
As you get further up in the skill levels, that gets a little bit harder. We do try to cross-train where we can, but we don't have, I can't say to you that I have enough personnel that they could overlap each other easily. But we are trying to do more cross-training so that if there is an issue, at least we have a place to start.
I'm happy to lend my dogs to help with the squirrel issue.
That would be appreciated.
So I just wanted to make sure I have this right. So you said you have 2 supervisors and 19 staff?
Correct.
And those salaries are not reflected in this budget. Is there?
There's 2 administrators.
Okay, so 2
Right.
administrators.
Right.
Not. So is there any way to get a sense for what the staffing budget is along with this?
So for the personnel costs, you're talking about another $3 million on top of the 4.2 for the staff. So that'd be staff, that's personnel, salaries, and the benefits, approximately about $3 million.
Any other questions? You guys have any questions? Okay, great. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so now we have staffing, right?
Hopefully the presentation is loaded at this point. We're having some computer issues this morning, so if you, hopefully it's in board
We have
docs.
some specialists here.
I was
I
gonna say,
know.
we've got computers.
Yeah,
After all of that?
I think it was user error. I'm sure it was user error, right? Is that what I'm supposed to say?
What do you need?
I just need to plug it. That's yours, isn't it?
Well,
You're
not going
you're
anywhere.
staying?
how much am I going to try?
Wait, let me.
Yeah, because we have this is the capital reserve stuff, but not, your stuff is not loaded.
It should be at this point. It was
Log out and log back in.
possibly if you found that to be,
It's not there.
all right. No.
You guys can.
I mean, I'm fine, where I'm sitting, I can go off the screen, so.
Dramatic. Are you sure? Okay. Hopefully I'll get a signal that it's loaded and I'll let you know that. So good morning. I'm here to talk about staffing generally and also more specifically related to our anticipated needs for the 18-19 school year and talk about some ways in which we tried to handle increasing enrollment growth and balance that with the staffing that we have in-house. So just to start, and again, this is probably more for the benefit of perhaps the person that didn't see the other presentations, but to just give some high-level numbers. Obviously, we're a large district serving over 8,500 students and growing. It's in public.
I got it.
You have it? Okay.
Yeah, keep
Okay, keep going? Okay. So I think it's notable, at least from my lens, is that not only are we serving students, we're serving families. And so we aim to be available to not only students every day, but for moms and dads and guardians as well. And as well as a community that accesses our facilities almost every day of the year. So with that entails a need for staffing to support not just students, but an entire community. In addition, we have 10 school buildings, 15 total buildings across the district, and I know this was discussed in greater detail with Mr. Ganan's presentation, but I think it's worth noting again. And at the core of our mission, obviously, is to provide a high-quality educational, co-curricular, and extracurricular experiences in a safe and welcoming environment. So that's our core mission, but again, it extends well beyond that as well every day. Again, a lot of this information was covered in prior presentations, but I think it's worth noting the extent to which our services are used every day, not only for students within the district, but students that are enrolled in private schools. So transportation, for example, we're transporting not only some portion of the 8,500 students, but additional students who are going to a total of approximately 140 different schools across the region. And that, I think, is notable in terms of the 1.5 million annual miles that our transport services covering annually. Food service program, another aspect of our services that may be less recognized to the public or acknowledged, which is serving over 3,200 meals every day and a free and reduced lunch student population of almost 1,000 students. Our health services program, which provides services to over 13,000 students. Again, this is inclusive of not only our district students, but students that are enrolled in private schools locally. I'm always in awe of the number of visits, wellness visits, injury visits that happen over the course of a year. The number being about 44,000 for last year. Seems like a lot of nursing services that I think need to be recognized. The technology system, Mr. Frazier covered this pretty comprehensively a few moments ago. Again, obviously you need a team of people to support all of that, the devices, the network, and the demands that our students have and our staff has relative to access to technology for instructional purposes. Our facility management, I noted earlier that this isn't about just serving the 8,500 students here every day, but it's also about the over nearly 10,000 hours of use of district facilities by community groups that we accommodate over the course of a year. And we have a human resource office that is very active year-round. Probably we're coming into our busy season relative to staffing for next year, but we're seeing nearly 10,000 applications received and reviewed annually. And without having a specific number on the communication system, we have a director, we have a newly appointed director of school and community relations that will continue to serve our community and families by issuing thousands of notices and processing comments and questions that come to us every day. So with that, to serve all of those needs, we have just over 1,500 employees, including 800 professional staff, just shy of 700 support staff, and about 70 administrators. We have other employment categories and categories of service, including our coaches and activity sponsors, temporary seasonal employment such as summer crew. And the summer crew is a group of individuals that support the buildings in the summertime and do the deep cleaning that's necessary to get our schools ready for a new school year. We also have a team of substitutes nearing probably 200 in number that support daily absences and long-term absences. In addition, we have some independent contractors that provide services outside the scope of what our employees provide day to day, and we also have a number of volunteers that support obviously the students in our schools. And I note that because the state has recently required, I should say it's been about 2 years now, for the district to be even more involved in that process by screening volunteers who provide service within the schools. So now we have a count or a number of those individuals, and it's upwards of several thousand clearances that have been processed in connection with the changes in the law. So all of that being said, relative to the programming that we provide for students and our needs across the district, Much of what we look at in terms of what are our staffing needs are driven by formulas and guidelines that I'll talk about in a minute. Thanks, George. Currently, we have class size guidelines at the elementary level that we closely follow to ensure that we're able to keep our class sizes for students at a level that we believe is effective for educational delivery, instructional delivery. And we'll look at that a little bit closer later in the presentation. We also have a number of courses that our secondary folks are able to teach during the school day. So there are limitations and guidelines that we follow in order to determine what level of classroom teachers we need year over year. Special education staffing and gifted staffing are primarily driven by Pennsylvania Department of Education caseload guidelines. And I'll drop down to the end, the instructional and behavioral aids are also often driven exclusively by requirements within a student's individual education plan. And then with respect to facilities and drivers, obviously drivers based on the number of buses and enrollment needs that we need to meet, as well as for our custodial and maintenance personnel, we have standards that are followed in order to make sure that we have the necessary staff to provide the level of cleaning and maintenance that allow our students, allow our schools to run effectively and efficiently.
Megan, I just want to interject if I can.
Of course.
Some of the there are complexities with the process of staffing. So let me take gifted staffing, for example. So if more students are identified gifted than you might need not a whole new teacher, you might need a .2 teacher or a .4 teacher. And that may occur in January, or that may occur in October, or that could occur at any time during the year. And you want the very best person. So you don't want to hire just anyone. But we are also faced with a shrinking number of available teachers. So just there are fewer and fewer people going into teaching. So we may be faced with needing not a full-time person, not in the beginning of the year, and not having very many apply, and not wanting to settle for somebody just because they're available. And that's a constant sort of tension that we face all the time. And that's just an example of it's not just about hiring somebody to fill a slot. It's trying to make all of those things fit at the same time. True with even bus drivers. I know Mr. Ganan is he's got signs out, and we're looking for people in those fields too. So just.
Thank you. So in terms of the budget, we know that salaries and benefits are a budget driver, and they comprise 77% of the budgeted expenditures. For 18-19, the projections for that cost are there at approximately $129 million for salary and $81 million for benefit costs. And the salary includes overtime, projected overtime, the EPER costs, which is our extra curricular support, our coaches, our club sponsors, et cetera. It also includes substitute costs. The benefits would include healthcare, dental, insurance, tuition reimbursement items such as that. And I would note that relative to coming up with this budget projection, there are compensation and benefit frameworks that we use to do that projection, which include the collective bargaining agreement that's in place, the Act 93 agreement that's in place with our administrators, personal contracts that are that a handful of our administrators have with the district, independent contracts. So again, there's a formula behind the number that is that can be found in source documents such as the contracts that are in place and are being negotiated currently.
Megan, before you go on,
Yep.
Salaries and benefits are 77% of our budget expenditures. How does that compare to other school districts in terms of what the percentage of?
Most districts are comparable to that. I mean, usually they're in that 70% range. I mean, that's pretty comparable for what.
Yeah, I'd say if you're not over 75% staffing, I would wonder, why it would be so low.
The only other places could be because some do outsource some of the programs, so that's the only reason it may be slightly less than that 70%. But generally, I think Bob's correct.
Yeah, I mean, there are districts, if you outsource your transportation and you outsource your food services, for instance, you'll drop that number and your contracted services number will go up. But
I guess the point I'm trying to make is, it's the people who really drive the education
It's a personal
process.
driven
this is an HR,
organization.
absolutely.
And that's what it is.
As we've said in the budget, so if more kids come, then you hire more personnel because we service kids. If this were a district of declining population, you would see the numbers of personnel go down, or at least you should. But then the budget would go down, and the percentage would still be probably within the same 75-80%.
All right, so we're going to move on to talking about our projected needs for next year relative to staffing. And there we go. So we're looking at both professional and support needs for next year. And there's one more part of that slide that didn't come up yet, as well as administrative needs. Relative to the professional staffing, we see across all levels a need to support in the classroom. The projections that you see for elementary are driven by the projections that we received from our demographers. So we look at our needs and plug those into our formula relative to class size guidelines. So we're anticipating a potential need to add 3.5 teachers at the elementary level. Now we're going to talk about partner schooling a little bit later. That may have an impact on that number, but for now, and the way that we've looked at it in the prior years since we've been using the demographers' reports, is how we calculate our projection for next year at the elementary level. Relative to other needs that we see at the elementary level, an interventionist is being recommended to support student needs at Penn-Wynne and Penn Valley. We know that we're going to need to support an incoming population and current population of English language learners, now referred to as ELD. So we need an English language development teacher to support Marion, and that support would be shared with Belmont Hills as well. So we look very carefully as we're staffing and looking to staff is ways in which we can share support across the district, so that if we're looking, we're not hiring 2.5 teachers. We're going to look to share a single teacher across buildings as needs grow and shift. We look to create flexibility around staffing. So in this case, Marion and Bella Kenwood share for that particular teacher is a projected need. We're recommending across all elementary schools to add a social worker. Currently, we have a social worker that supports basically K-12, Alexander Saralise, and also focuses on the elementary level, but in terms of, we have not added a social worker in I don't think since we've added 1,000 students, and we're seeing a need to have an individual who would be able to focus across the 6 buildings and provide that additional level of support, together with our current social worker, Alex. Across the middle schools, that's where we're seeing the growth starting to bubble that we had seen across the elementary in the last few years. In order to support the teaming model, along with that growth, we're recommending adding classroom teachers to both Bala Cynwyd and Welsh Valley to support that teaming model. And it's anticipated that adding those teachers, not only is there a need now, but that will help to support the continuing growth that we know will occur, because the students are already here. So that will continue to be a need at the middle school that we believe needs to be met beginning next year. Gifted support, again, at the middle school, we're proposing an additional gifted support teacher to support both Bala Cynwyd and Welsh Valley. Again, that's driven by PDE caseload requirements. We're projecting that based on rising students into those schools that we will have a need for additional support there. Again, I'd mentioned the English language development teacher, and then a school counselor to support both middle schools, again, because of growing enrollment needs across those schools. Finally, at the middle school level, we see a need, and I believe this may have been covered in Ms. Frazier's presentation, for an autistic learning support teacher in Welsh Valley, again, due to rising student need at that school. Finally, at the high school, again, we're seeing a need for additional science support in the science based on student choice and growing enrollment, is a biology teacher at Lower Merion High School. Across the other categories of employment, the recommendation is to add a driver and a bus aide, again, based on serving students not only here, also our private schools. The enrollment and routing would necessitate that additional staffing. Instructional aides that we talked about earlier, based on our student needs, we anticipate and have anticipated over the last several budget cycles is a need to add 3 additional instructional aides as a projection. And staff nurses, which we've not, I don't believe in, again, the last several years made a recommendation to add staff nurses, but we do see, based on enrollment, a need to add support there, as well as we're finding, and I'm looking to Ms. Frazier, that the support that we can get occasionally through an outside service doesn't meet all of the needs that we have relative to nursing and health services. Okay, thank you. And then finally, for administration, we're recommending for next year to add additional 1.5 elementary assistant principals. This would give the elementaries support in each building that's consistent across the week. And we think that's important, as well as to support the enrollment growth. Finally, we've been closely watching the growth at Lower Merion, and believe that based on providing a better level of support for the growing enrollment there, that we're proposing to add another assistant principal to that school at this time.
Megan, so I'm checking my math here. You're looking at 16.5 new professional staff? Does that sound right?
Correct.
So, for example, you talked about Marion needing a half full-time equivalent of an English language development teacher, as does Bala Cynwyd. That would hopefully be the same person split between the two sites?
Yes.
So wherever possible, we try and fill rather than have a number of half-time people, we try and have one full-time person who services two different places.
Yes, and can I probably should have given a little background in terms of our process. So our process to take a look at what our staffing needs began months ago, where each supervisor, principal has an opportunity to take a look at their staffing, take a look at their projected enrollment growth, and provide us with recommendations. And then through a number of meetings, we discuss what those needs are, whether they are they for the 18-19 school year or in the future. How can we best meet them in a way that's financially efficient, and there are many examples where there's been sharing of staff that you won't see reflected here, and I don't know if someone wants to speak to that, maybe Dr.
Just to add to that, we're not anticipating any part-time positions being added. That's just the additional net gain in staffing. So we feel we can supplement other positions to make sure that we have full-time staff.
So theoretically, there might already be a half-time English language development person at Marion, and you're just going to move that
Sometimes
person to
that
full-time.
happens.
Sometimes that's
So,
the case.
right.
Right.
But
No guarantee, but that would be one way.
Yes.
So that you would, it shows up as an increase in the budget, but it's still the same.
Correct.
It's one person.
But I want to take the opportunity because the way we have to budget is very different than a business. And I've had conversations with business people, and they say, well, here's what I do. And I'm like, okay, but you're probably reshaping your budget quarterly. So this is, as Megan Schaefer has said, we begin this process in the fall. We take another look after high school kids have made some decisions in the spring. But we're basically operating on enrollment projections that have occurred that we're getting in October, November. If we put in the budget too many more than we expect, then we get a variance, and people say, well, you shouldn't have budgeted that. And if you don't put in enough, and more people come in a particular category, and then you have to figure out how you're going to pay for that, because that's an ongoing expense, not just a one-time expense. And so that's the balance that we have to play. And in some of those areas, like the special education and the gifted and so forth and so on, 2 or 3 students can make the difference between whether you add a section or you don't add a section. And the science of it is, or the calculus of it is difficult.
So just to piggyback on that, this is what we're budgeting, but not necessarily what we're hiring, right? This is what we think we're going to need, but it will be dependent on what the situation is on the ground before we actually, bring somebody on.
It will depend on that, and it will also depend on what we do vis-a-vis budgeting between now and the end of the year. So, for example, Mrs. Schaefer is going to go over some pending staffing requests in a second. Last year, we had some pending staffing requests. One of them was the teacher deans at the middle schools. Mm-hmm. And what I had said to the middle school principals is, at the time of her presentation, can't do it just yet. We'll see how things shake out by the end of the year. Things shook out well enough that we could afford those positions. And if you talk to the middle school people, they'll tell you that those positions have made a significant difference in the climate of the middle schools over the course of the year. So I tend to hold off, as long as I can to see where we are before we have to pull the trigger.
Right. And I think the example of the elementary classroom teachers, depending on enrollment, depending on partner schooling, that whether or not we'll need to, fill all 3.5, gifted support, we're anticipating that need based on where we see our students now and what they'll, rising into the middle school, but that could change. So typically, those are some of the later fills that we do, but we will post. We want to post early so we get the best candidates to look at, but those would be examples of where you see them, we anticipate them, but we may not end up filling them. So with the individuals that are highlighted here, although as I transition to the next slide, we do have pending staffing requests that could move up based on our, if we don't need to fill, for example, 3.5 elementary positions, that may be an opportunity for us to take a look at these other pending staffing requests, which we feel certainly have merit and may be essential needs, again, depending on what we see as a result of our growth. Again, gifted support being a potential need at the elementary school. There, okay.
Might just go back to the.
Yep, I
don't
can do that.
Say anything more about those?
No.
No?
No.
So we'll go through we'll go through a process, if funds are available, to look at that. So I'm very interested in the additional computer science teacher at the high school. I'm also looking, I want to know a little bit more from them about their world language needs at the middle school. I know Scott Everslag likes the idea of the instructional coach position at the elementary schools, and he's got an initiative there. But I'm the superintendent, he's the assistant superintendent. I'm not so sure that he's going to win on that. And so there are those things that we'll take a look. But these are sort of, this would be good to do, as opposed to the others are things that we're pretty sure we have to. Same thing with some of the support positions.
All right, so I'm going to be transitioning to an example of sort of the formula-driven staffing. We looked at this last year, and I thought that it might be helpful to refresh the staffing guidelines for elementary. This is an example of Penn Valley Elementary School. You see the staffing guidelines just in that top gold band. Currently, we use an N+1 number to determine when we will break a section into a new class. So what you see at all the drama surrounding am I doing something wrong?
Sorry about
Ooh.
that.
Oh,
Cancel.
okay, all right. Okay, all right. Thank you, George.
I don't know that I helped.
User error. So first, in first grade, for example, the reason that this is highlighted is to show that once we hit that 23 per section, we turn it over, or add another section, I should say. So you see that number 5, it went from a 4 to a 5. What that means is that your class size, obviously this is math, average goes down to 18 or 19 per classroom, and then you have 21 seats available. By comparison, if you look at the 5th grade section, you see you have 130 students, 5 sections, and exactly 26 students per class. So by way of transparency, this is how it operates. And this is, sometimes you end up with low averages, sometimes you end up at the top. I think, the perception is we can continue to just add students until they all get to the top number in each classroom, but that's not how students matriculate into a school, and therefore we place them as they come to us. So that just gives you an example of how we look at section sizes as we begin preparing for the new school year. And this is updated it's updated weekly heading into June, and then almost daily until school starts. So we look at those numbers very closely, especially in light of our partner school program, which I'll get to in just a minute. But the idea is that we have, again, at Penn Valley, and all of these little kids here are supposed to represent actual bodies in Penn Wen. But I thought this was a helpful way to think about, student populations. It's not just the student that comes to us. Students come to us and have needs that need to be met. And some of those overlap, so I don't want to give an impression that a student that's gifted may also be a student who is identified as chronically absent. So, you do see those things overlap. But as far as percentages of population, that's what your average, your Penn Valley looks like in terms of a profile. Of course, that doesn't include a student that needs a nurse on any given day, a student who's going through a divorce situation, a student whose grandparent died. So there's a continual need to support students on a daily basis beyond those categories that are recognized in some manner through state guidelines, federal guidelines, et cetera.
Megan, do you happen to know offhand how many, what the change in the total elementary population is between our 10th day enrollment numbers and now?
Off the top of my head, I can say it grew. I can get that information for you.
Do you just have an order of magnitude? Is it more or less than 100 students? All right.
I would.
Yeah, I mean,
it would be a guess. So.
Did you say just elementary?
Just elementary. I'm just.
I'd rather doubt it. I mean,
Yeah, I would say so, because you lose students too over the course of a year who move out. But
Okay.
I could easily get that information.
Yeah, I'd just be curious to see what the change was over the course of the year.
I would say there was a net gain. I don't know what the exact.
We
number
would
be.
expect that because the projection for next year is higher than the projection for this year was.
Right.
So.
And I know as we look at last year's projection versus where we are now, we're above that mark already. So.
Yeah, I'd love to see that number.
Well, I mean, I can understand that. I want to be cautious about how we report that number out, if we do report it out, because enrollment does change almost on a daily basis in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So because we're doing staffing and all kinds of budgeting and things, we kind of need to put our stake in the ground and say, these are the number of kids at this point in time and work from that, because otherwise you're adjusting your numbers on a daily basis, and that can confuse the public and make it almost impossible to budget. Anecdotally, my fifth grader 3 years ago got a new student in his grade in mid-May.
Mm-hmm.
We're 4 weeks away from the end of the school year, and a new student shows up, and we have to place this student. And by the same token, family, friends move out, you hear about, so-and-so is leaving the district. So I don't want to focus too much, because I think our bedrock is the 10-day enrollment, and from that, we really should be focusing on, that's where our numbers are, that's what we're working off of. Worrying about numbers in January and February might only muddy that conversation.
Yeah, I can give you just an example that's sort of relative to that. At Marion, right now, the enrollment is about 20 students higher than what next year's projected enrollment is. So we're already starting above what's projected for next year for Marion, for example. So I think to Mr. Driscoll's point, we have to take into account that those numbers do fluctuate. And
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm
Yeah.
just curiosity.
okay. So as a follow-up to that last slide, this is intended to, and I recognize that it's somewhat difficult to read, to reflect the sort of diversity of roles across, any given elementary building, which ranges from the principal to our instructional aides, our secretarial support, custodians, special education teachers, challenge teachers, special area teachers, which we haven't touched on. And so that was intended to share that we have to think across a number of job categories when we think about staffing an elementary school building. And then just to talk about sort of the engine behind some of the staffing, our Human Resources Department, and Amira Ibrahim is here today, who's our new Human Resource Manager, although she probably doesn't feel new anymore since it's been several months. And there's when you start here in the district, there's no slow start. You kind of dive in and get to work. So just to talk about the Human Resource Department, just generally, as I know the other directors had a chance to talk about their departments from a staffing standpoint. Not only is the function for Human Resources hiring, we have a number of compliance responsibilities, investigations, accommodations, benefit management, payroll processing, substitute coordination, volunteer screening, which I talked about earlier, and reporting obligations, both for state and federal purposes. So it's with over 1,500 employees, and again, the vast majority of what we do is in-house. We do not contract the services to any great degree that we offer to students, to families, and to the community. So the burden of managing from a personnel standpoint is within the Human Resources Office locally. And then as far as our hiring process, and these potential employees that we're talking about, as well as, as well as the need to hire long-term subs year to year, both for professionals, for our support staff. To highlight this process, it occurs year-round. There's no one hiring season. We're constantly hiring. We're constantly out there in the marketplace looking for highly qualified individuals for every role that we have. We post it on our website through a system called Talent Ed. We may advertise it externally. We attend recruiting fairs. We just finished our Delaware Valley Consortium for Equity and Excellence Educators of Color Recruitment Fair and the MCIU Diversity Hiring Fair. Our applications are received and reviewed, as I mentioned, through a web-based system, and those are all screened internally, and interviews are conducted. And this really reflects not only, I'm not just talking about teachers, each one of our hires is put through a rigorous process. Support staff individuals are usually interviewed multiple times, from at a building level to a central office level. Teachers typically are required, I shouldn't say typically, they are required to do demonstration lessons, writing samples, testing, et cetera. The recommended candidate moves forward to HR, the assistant superintendent, and the superintendent, and then before an offer's extended, we make sure that we've done reference checks, background clearances, et cetera. Then we make the recommendation to the board for approval, and then there's a fairly extensive onboarding process as well.
Megan, just to highlight, we had a question at the board meeting the other night regarding our diversity hiring and
Yes.
recruitment, and I just want to point out your second bullet point right there just talks about that. Are there, so those are two recruitment fairs that we attend. Is there anything else that we do specifically to try and ensure diversity in our staff?
Yeah. I'll just say a few things, and I'll turn it back to Dr. F. Over time, we have done not only these types of events, but we've also hosted events to specifically target educators of color, giving those individuals an opportunity to learn more about the district, meet with our administrators, and have worked with the DVCEE to provide programming. We also, I know that the Achievement Imperative Task Force, and I'm sure that's what Dr. Evslag was about to talk about, so I'll defer to him to share that piece of what currently we've been doing.
So one of the subcommittees on the Achievement Imperative Task Force focused on minority recruitment and hiring, and did some engage in some research around best practices, making some recommendations, working hand in hand with HR, but also recommendations at the building level for hiring practices that will certainly move us in the right direction with that.
And we obviously face the same critical mass issues that you have. So if you have less teachers, you have, fewer people, diversity also in the pool. So this is a national issue that we really, I think, need to come to grips with.
And then finally, I'm circling back to partner schooling. I probably should have moved this up a little bit in the conversation, but to note again that this will be the third year we've implemented a partner school plan. And this, while it's intended to help with facilities and keep our class sizes within the guidelines, it does, relative to staffing, alleviate enrollment pressure and allow us to manage the staffing piece a little bit easier, because we are able to say by May 1st, June 1st, what those sections will be at the elementary level, so we can begin recruiting and staffing those sections. Currently, we have approximately 30 students who have been partner schooled over the course of this year and last year. Over half of them are fifth grade students. So that means that they were partner schooled just for 1 year and were new to the district, which I think, we have tried to, as we look at staffing, as we were looking at partner schooling, that situation ensures that someone new to the district is there for 1 year and then moves on with their peers to the middle school. They're arguably homeschooled peers or attendance area peers. So we feel that this has been successful. It's relative to the relieving of some of the enrollment pressure across the buildings. And again, a secondary outcome, which wasn't really why we entertained this to begin with, is that it allows us more precision in how we staff those schools in the following year. So we're continuing that for the 18-19 school year as well.
Do you know roughly how many sections we think we saved that we would have had to break open had we not partner school?
At least 4.
So that's a significant financial savings as well.
Correct.
Could you just describe the May 1, June 1 deadline for people watching who may not know what that means?
Sure. The May 1, June 1 deadline refers to the online portion of the registration process, and we've asked that families, in order to guarantee a seat, that they complete the online registration process by May 1st, and then finish the process by June 1st. And by finish, I mean there's a requirement for a family to come to registration, present the required documents in order to finalize their registration. And so that by June 1st, we have a sort of final count of who we have so far, and can begin the process, like I said, of determining those sections. Sure. Any other questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick comment on partner schooling. I think it's a good thing for us. I still wish we didn't have to do it, but I understand that we're doing it. But it's not the end-all, be-all. Given our enrollment growth, we cannot partner our way out of this enrollment growth and never build nor hire additional teachers. It's just, it's a tiny fix, but we're having a bigger issue with enrollment growth. And I think some people say, well, you can just partner your way out of that, and that's over the next couple of years, and that's simply just not true.
I think early on in the debate, it was said, you've got all these open spots. And to be honest with you, I didn't take the comment seriously, because I thought anybody looking at it rationally would understand that that doesn't work. And then I heard people repeating it, so I had to take it more seriously. So if I've got, open spots in 5th grade and I got a 3rd grade kid, that doesn't help. It's got to be, an open spot's got to be where the kid is, and we don't have control over 2 things: where people live and how many children they have. Wish I could, but I can't. So that's what we're trying to predict.
But even in a similar vein, because of our elementary school is a different animal, like the student stays with the teacher primarily for the whole day. Middle and high school, they bounce around. So while partner schooling, I think, works at the elementary level, I don't know how, I can't visualize it working at the middle or high school level for that very reason, that kids are bouncing all day long within the building they're in.
And we do have some flux in class size with some of the, different levels of classes and so forth and so on. It just doesn't seem like it's going to work there.
Any other questions? Pat, you have a question? Okay, Megan, thank you very much for that. And I think we're going to have one other presentation, right, Vic?
Correct. Oh, one more agenda item.
Yeah.
The next presentation is on curriculum, as Scott mentioned, on May 16th. So, we have one other-
No, I meant one other agenda.
One other agenda item we have. So this agenda item here, I know the board in policy is reviewing some of the best practices and looking to modify our fund balance policies. So one of the things that we wanted to kind of go over, just gotta move over there.
Do you want to put it up there?
I guess I'll have to slide over.
Is it in board docs, Vic?
It is
Yeah.
important.
Give me a second. It's there. It's there. Okay. So, one of the things we wanted to review was what are reserves that we have. So our cap reserve is the reserve fund that we have at the school district. And, so the items here are what you've seen in Mr. Ganne's presentation on the capital improvement plan. And these are all the items that are scheduled for 18-19. Some have already been approved by the school board, the cafeteria modifications and the replacement of the turf and the basin 2.1. I think have already been approved. There may have been a couple other items that have been approved, and some are in the works. So that is what is in the capital improvement plan for 18-19. You can see it's $6.5 million. The other part is the bus transportation replacement plan. The school board did approve the replacement of 14 buses this past, winter. So that is what is scheduled to be received in 2018-19. So we have 14 buses coming in, probably sometime later in 2018, early 2019. We'll be coming back with what our expectations are for bus replacements, probably for the summer of 2019.
And then, as Mr. Frazier presented earlier, as far as information systems, there's about $512,000 in items to be purchased out of capital reserve for the district-wide network. So that comes out to about $8.5 million is what has been planned out of the capital reserve for the upcoming school year. Now, we don't have $8.5 million in the capital reserve account. We approximately about $6.8 million, so we're short by right now by about $1.7 million to do all these items.
So what we're hoping, obviously, is that we will have fund balance that we'll be able to move into that account at the end of the year. So based on the changes in our board policy, this is the event where we share this with the Finance Committee and the public. Then you'll take a vote to actually move the money when the money is there to be moved. Because there's no action to take now, is there, Vic?
There is none.
There is none, that's right.
So, can you just explain that a little more in detail? Basically, we're hoping that what we budgeted will be greater than what we spent.
Correct.
And that whatever that difference is, we're hoping to fill the gap between what we currently have in capital reserve.
Correct.
And
Our
what we're
hope is
hoping to
that if our revenues, coming better and our expenses don't come in as high as we had budgeted for, that we will have some type of additional funds that we can transfer into the capital reserve fund. So there would be a board motion that the board would, approve to transfer money into that fund. And then obviously, once we get our final numbers, sometime in the fall, we will come back with a confirming what that exact number would be.
So we've always shared information on what the capital reserve funds placements were, either at the facilities and purchasing committee or at other separate committees. The policy just says, bring that all together and do it at one time for a finance committee. So that's what we're doing.
Correct. And every month, we have, as far as our financial report, is the capital reserve fund, cash balances and everything. So that's in the monthly report, so it's public.
And part of the auditor's report in the fall.
Okay, so we won't know for sure, probably till late September, October, how much money we have in excess to transfer into this fund, correct?
Correct.
So right now, we have like about a 2 million shortfalls from what we feel we need in terms of bus replacement in the technology plan and what we currently have. If our number doesn't come out the way we hope it does, do we go back and then delete things off of this, or do we find money? Do we take money from our committed fund balance to cover? Do we have a plan for what we would do?
We would be reluctant to take it out of that because we know the plan is to build an 11th campus. But we also have to have some of the committed fund balance in capital because we know that we have to deal with the needs at Harridan High School. So we would be reluctant, I think is the way.
Correct. So on part of that, we would have to go through then and look at some of these projects and see what prioritize them. And I think Mr. Ganan has done it over the years. We've shifted around based on priority. It just won't be Pat. Person is.
I just want to comment on this slide because we're showing 3 boiler replacements, Belmont Hills, Kinwood, and Marion. And while Pat's team does a very good job of trying to gauge out useful life, my recollection in conversation with facilities is 2, if not all 3 of these failed slightly earlier than we had planned on, that didn't quite meet. So all of a sudden, this is kind of why you want this, why you need this because we're not going to not run a school in the winter. We need to have heat in the building. You need to replace boilers. I believe we've talked about the basin failing. We knew it was kind of having issues for a while, but we've come to the point where we can no longer wait. It has to get done. And then I think Pat does a good job of what project can wait a year, but this is the year. But if you don't have this kind of reserve fund, you could be scrambling trying to replace things you need, like chillers and boilers and basins, if I have it right.
That's what the purpose of this is for items like this that come up, that any, I guess, school district or public entity has a fund put together for unanticipated major capital items like this, because if you don't, correct, you're in trouble. Questions on the capital reserve fund? Okay. The other part we wanted to kind of just review is, this is the committed fund balance in our general fund that the board approved last spring. And this is what our current situation is. As Mr. Copeland said, we do have a lot of these things committed for our enrollment expansion issues that we're currently in discussion with. So you can see the 15 million is there, and then we have the PISA reserve. I think Mr. Copeland went over that in his budget presentation, I think last week, about the PISA, we call it the PISA reserve. And then we have a couple of items with the post-employment benefits under GASB 45, which now is GASB 67 and 68. So we'll have to get a new actuarial report to see what that number is going to look like in the future. And then we have a small amount of money in for rate stabilization on our variable interest rate bonds. So right now we're at $35.8 million.
I thought I might. So the question has come up from time to time concerning the PISA's reserve. Assuming we issue a bond, I'm going to assume we're going to issue a $100 million bond next fall. I have to assume that. I can't assume less. So if there's an issuance of that bond in the 2019-2020 school year, we'll be able to offset the increased debt service because we have a debt service reserve. And so we budget right now $28 million. The debt, as the debt service grows, it'll grow to about $30 million. We'll be able to offset that because we have a debt service reserve. We'll be able to do that the first full year of the bond issuance. The next full year of the bond issuance, we'll be able to offset some of that with a debt service reserve. Some of it, right. The year after that, when the debt service goes up to about $31 million, we'll have to budget more for that debt service reserve. Then, the year after that, we hope to open a new school. We're planning, or we're assuming the new school will be a middle school. The operating expenses will go up $4 million. This will be part of my final budget presentation. That'll go up $5 million. So 4 years from now, we'll be at an $8 million crunch time. Just so that we're aware of that. And I'll go over that more in my final budget presentation. I just want you to know this is something we're planning for.
I have all kinds of questions on that, but I'll wait till you make that presentation. Are there any other questions on this? Or
Just on the PISAs, real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention. So, one way to soften that blow is to begin to use the PISA's reserve to, that was the whole point. I don't know why I left that out. I'm glad you did. So when people ask me about the PISA's reserve, when are you going to use it? Well, I'm going to use it when, at that point, to soften the blow for when that $8 million delta comes into play. And if you do what others have argued and said, well, just use it now and reduce the budget, you can do that, but you'll have to make up for that, which you don't have, plus try and deal with the delta down the road.
I just want to echo, I think that is extremely responsible, that is what that money is there for, and it should be used in a timely fashion, not in a knee-jerk fashion. And I believe this administration's worked very hard to put some parameters with the uncertainties of future budgeting. You know, will it really happen in the 1920 year or the 2021 year, I think is, we can argue that, but I think to zero out that PSERS balance now, given what we're looking at, would be grossly irresponsible.
Any other questions or comments, Sue? Okay, thank you very much. So our next meeting is an evening meeting, May 16th, and that will be curriculum.
Crescendo.
The part of this that we actually affects our kids directly. Any other, again, just for those who are choosing to watch this later, if you have questions about any of this information, send it to Capital Comments. We'll try and respond. I'm sorry, Community Comments. But it's dated. Yes, send it to Capital Comments. That's pretty dated. That's about 10 years old. So send it to Community Comments. We'll try and respond to them when we get them, and then we'll bring them forward at the beginning of our next meeting. Same thing with board. If you have any other questions, get them to admin, and we'll try and get them answered. And seeing any other questions or comments or information, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.